Unipark had been alone on the forest moon for 3 days when everything changed. Her ship had crashed in the mountains after an engine failure. She had survived with minor injuries, but the communication system was destroyed. No one knew where she was. No rescue would come unless she found a way to send a signal dot, so she did what her grandmother had always taught her. When things are bad, cook something. Food fixes everything. The forest around her was strange but beautiful. Tall trees with blue leaves reached toward a purple sky. Small creatures with too many legs ran through the bush. The air smelled like rain and something sweet, like flowers she could not see. Yuna had tested the local plants carefully. Some were safe to eat. She found tubers that tasted like potatoes, and herbs that smelled like the rosemary from her mother's garden back in Bizan. She mixed them with dried meat from her emergency supplies and made a simple stew over her small fire dot. It was nothing special, just survival food. But the smell of it cooking made her feel less alone. She was stirring the pot when she heard the sound, a soft rustling in the bushes. Then another. Then a third. Yuna's hand moved slowly toward the weapon at her belt. She had been trained for situations like this. Unknown planet. Unknown creatures. Stay calm. Stay ready. 3 faces appeared at the edge of her camp. They were not human. They looked like wolves that had learned to stand on 2 legs. Their fur was silver and blue, thick and fluffy like they were wearing winter coats. Their eyes were large and golden, catching the light from her fire like coins at the bottom of a well. They were young. Yuna could tell immediately. Something about the way they moved, curious but clumsy, told her these were children. Cubs. Babies of whatever species they belonged to. The largest one was maybe a meter tall. The smallest barely reached her waist. They watched her with those huge golden eyes, noses twitching as they sniffed the air. Yuna did not move. Her training said to stay still and wait. Do not show fear. Do not show aggression. Let them decide what to do. The smallest cub took a step forward. Then another. Its nose was working hard, pulling in the smell of her cooking. It looked at the pot, then at her, then at the pot again. Its stomach made a loud growling sound. Yuna felt something twist in her chest. She knew that sound. She had made that sound herself many times during the hungry years when her family had struggled. Before her mother found better work. Before things got easier, the cub was hungry. All 3 of them were hungry, she realized. She could see it now in the way they stood, in the desperate attention they gave to her cooking pot. They were thin under all that fluffy fur. Too thin. Her training said not to interact with alien species without proper protocols. Her grandmother's voice in her head said something different. It said, feed the hungry children. Yuna, always feed the hungry children. Yuna made her choice. She moved slowly, keeping her hands visible. She picked up her spare container, a small metal bowl she used for water. She ladled a portion of stew into it. Not much. She did not have much to give, but enough for a taste. She set the bowl on the ground between herself and the cubs. Then she stepped back and waited. The cubs looked at each other. They made small sounds, high-pitched yips and whines that might have been words in their own language. They seemed to be arguing about something. The smallest cub won the argument. It crept forward on all 4s, moving low to the ground like it expected a trap. It reached the bowl and sniffed it carefully. Then it took a bite. The cub's eyes went wide. It made a sound that Yuna did not need to translate. Pure, absolute joy. It dove into the bowl and ate everything in 3 quick bites, licking the metal clean. The other 2 cubs rushed forward, shoving their sibling aside to sniff the empty bowl. They looked at Yuna with desperate hope. More? Their eyes asked. Please, more? Yuna felt her heart break a little. She showed them her pot, tilting it so they could see how little was left. She pointed at herself, then at the pot, trying to explain that this was all she had. This was her food for the next 2 days. The cubs seemed to understand. Their ears drooped. The smallest one made a sad whimpering sound that was universal across all species. "I'm sorry," Una said softly. "I wish I had more to give you." The largest cub looked at her for a long moment. Its golden eyes were intelligent, thoughtful. It was thinking about something. Then it turned to the other two and yipped at them sharply. They yipped back. An argument broke out, quick and fierce, full of gestures and sounds and what looked like pointing at Una and her pot. Finally, all 3 cubs seemed to agree on something. The largest one looked at Una and made a sound that was almost like a bow. A gesture of respect, maybe. Or gratitude. Then all 3 cubs turned and ran into the forest, disappearing into the blue leaf trees like shadows melting into darkness. Una sat down heavily by her fire. Her hands were shaking. She had just made contact with an alien species. She had fed them. She had broken about 15 different protocols, but she did not regret it. Those cubs had been hungry. She had food. The choice had been simple. She looked at her cooking pot and sighed. She would have to find more tubers tomorrow. Maybe set some traps for small animals. She could manage. She had survived worse. The forest was quiet now. The fire crackled and popped. Above her, strange stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Una did not know that those 3 cubs were running through the forest as fast as their legs could carry them. She did not know that they were heading home to their clan with an incredible story to tell. She did not know that her simple act of kindness had just set something much larger into motion. She only knew that she had done the right thing, and for now, that was enough. She ate her remaining stew, watched the stars come out, and tried not to think about how long she might be stuck on this strange and beautiful moon. Somewhere in the forest, 3 cubs were changing her future with every step they took toward home. Una was collecting water from a nearby stream when she heard them coming. Heavy footsteps. Many of them. Moving through the forest with purpose, not trying to hide. Whatever was approaching wanted her to know it was there. She dropped her water container and ran back to camp. Her weapon was in her hand before she reached the fire pit. She pressed her back against a tree and waited. Heart pounding in her chest. They emerged from the tree line in a loose circle around her camp. 12 of them. Adults of the same species as the cubs she had fed. But these were not children. These were warriors. Each one stood over 2 meters tall. Their silver blue fur was sleek and well-groomed, not fluffy like the cubs. Their bodies were heavy with muscle. They wore armor made from something that looked like the shell of a giant insect, black and shiny and hard. They carried curved swords at their belts and spears in their hands. Their golden eyes were fixed on Una with an intensity that made her blood run cold. She was going to die. She was sure of it. The cubs had told their parents about the strange creature in the forest, and the adults had come to eliminate the threat. Una raised her weapon but did not fire. She knew it would be useless against 12 armored warriors. She would take 1 down, maybe 2, before they killed her. The leader of the group stepped forward. She was female. Una could tell somehow. There was something in the way she moved, confident and commanding. A long scar ran across her muzzle, and a streak of white marked her fur from ear to chin. The scarred female raised 1 hand, palm open and facing YU and a dot. It was a gesture Una recognized. Every species she had ever encountered used some version of it. It meant peace. It meant I am not attacking you. Una lowered her weapon slightly, but did not put it away. The scarred female made a sharp sound, almost like a bark. Behind her, the circle of warriors parted. 3 small figures came tumbling through the gap. The cubs. They ran toward Una without fear, yipping and chattering in their high-pitched voices. They circled her legs, pointing at her and then at their mouths and then back at her. They tugged at her clothes, pulling her toward the scarred female. The smallest cub grabbed Yuna's hand in both of its paws and looked up at her with those huge golden eyes. It made a sound that was clearly a question. Yuna did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. "Come with us, please." She looked at the scarred female. The warrior was watching her with an expression that might have been curiosity. There was no anger in those golden eyes. No threat. Slowly, Yuna put her weapon away. The scarred female's mouth opened in what Yuna first thought was a snarl. Then she saw the way the warrior's tail was wagging slightly behind her. It was not a threat display. It was a smile. A terrifying smile full of very large teeth, but a smile nonetheless. What followed was the most frustrating hour of Yuna's life. The scarred female tried to communicate something to her. She used gestures, sounds, drawings in the dirt. She pointed at Yuna's cooking pot, then at the cubs, then at herself, then spread her arms wide to indicate something very large. Yuna tried to understand. She repeated the gestures back, asking questions with her hands and face. The cubs helped, acting out little scenes that seemed to tell a story. Slowly, piece by piece, Yuna began to understand. The cubs had returned to their home. They had told everyone about the strange creature who could transform dead plants and old meat into something wonderful. They had described the taste of Yuna's stew with such excitement that the whole clan had wanted to know more. The clan's leader, their matriarch, had sent this hunting party to investigate, and apparently to bring Yuna back with them. They wanted her to cook for them. Yuna stared at the scarred female in disbelief. She pointed at herself, then mimed the act of cooking, then spread her arms wide like the warrior had done. The scarred female nodded eagerly. Yes, that was exactly what she meant. "You want me to cook for your whole clan?" Yuna asked out loud, knowing they could not understand her words. The smallest cub tugged at her hand again and made a pleading sound. Yuna thought about her situation. She was stranded on an alien moon with no way to call for help. She had limited supplies and no idea how long she would be stuck here. These creatures could have killed her easily, but instead they were inviting her to their home, and they would feed her. She could see that in the way the scarred female gestured at the forest around them, then at her own mouth. They would provide everything she needed if she would just come with them. It was not really a difficult choice. "Okay," Yuna said. She nodded her head, hoping the gesture meant the same thing to them as it did to her. "I'll come with you." The cubs erupted in celebration, jumping and yipping and running circles around her legs. Even the adult warriors seemed pleased, their tails wagging as they watched. The scarred female stepped forward and placed one large paw on Yuna's shoulder. The touch was gentle, careful not to hurt. Up close, Yuna could see the intelligence in those golden eyes, the warmth beneath the warrior's fierce appearance. The female spoke a single word in her own language. Yuna did not understand it, but she understood the tone. "Thank you." Yuna gathered her few possessions from the camp. The cooking pot, the water container, her emergency kit. She looked around at the small clearing that had been her home for 3 days. Then she followed the Vulf people into the forest, surrounded by cubs who would not stop chattering about the wonderful things she was going to make for them. She had no idea what she was walking into. She did not know anything about these people or their culture, or what they expected from her dad, but for the first time since her crash, Yuna felt something like hope. Maybe she was not going to die on this moon after all. Maybe she was going to do something much more interesting. The Korath settlement took Yuna's breath away. It was built into the base of a massive cliff that rose toward the purple sky like a wall at the edge of the world. Caves of all sizes dotted the rock face, connected by wooden bridges and rope ladders. Wooden buildings grew from the stone like mushrooms. their roofs made of blue leaves from the forest trees. Hundreds of the Vulf people lived there. They stopped what they were doing to watch as the hunting party led Yuna through the main path. Warriors and craftspeople, elders with gray muzzles and cloudy eyes, cubs everywhere, peeking out from behind their parents' legs with curious, golden stares. Yuna felt very small and very human. The three cubs who had found her ran ahead, announcing her arrival with excited yips. Yuna heard her name in their chatter, or something close to it. Yuna. U-Na. The scarred female led her to a large cave near the center of the settlement. Inside, fires burned in stone pits, and the walls were lined with shelves holding containers of all sizes. It was a food storage room, and it was full. Yuna walked among the shelves with wide eyes. There were cuts of red meat hanging from hooks, still fresh. Baskets of roots and tubers in colors she had never seen. Mushrooms the size of her head. Fruits that smelled sweet, even from a distance. Dried herbs bundled with string. Containers of rendered fat. Jars of honey-like liquid. The Korath had plenty of food. They were not starving, but something was wrong. Yuna picked up a piece of meat and sniffed it. Fresh, good quality. She examined the tuber. Perfectly ripe. She tasted a drop of the honey liquid. Sweet and complex. These were excellent ingredients. So why had those cubs been so thin? Why had they reacted to her simple stew like it was the greatest thing they had ever tasted? The answer came when Yuna watched a Korath family eating their evening meal. They did not cook. Not really. They threw meat onto fire until it was barely warm, then ate it almost raw. They ate vegetables whole, without cutting or seasoning them. They did not mix foods or add flavors. They did not sit together and share. Each family member took their portion and ate alone, quickly, without pleasure. Eating was a task to complete, not an experience to enjoy. Food was fuel to these people. Nothing more. Yuna understood now. The cubs had not been starving for food. They had been starving for something they did not even know existed. Flavor, texture, the joy of eating something truly delicious. She was going to change that. The scarred female assigned two helpers to work with Yuna. One was a young male, barely past childhood, who was fascinated by everything Yuna did. She called him Taiho in her mind because she could not pronounce his real name. The other was an elderly female with patient eyes and steady hands. Yuna named her Yunji. Together, they set up cooking stations throughout the storage cave. Yuna showed them how to build fires that burned at different temperatures. She taught them the concept of a cutting board and demonstrated how to slice vegetables into pieces that would cook evenly. Taiho and Yunji watched everything with intense concentration. They asked questions through gestures, and Yuna answered as best she could. Why cut the meat? Why add the herbs? Why wait so long before eating? Because, Yuna tried to explain with her hands and her expressions, food should be more than fuel. Food should make you happy. They did not understand at first. The concept was too foreign, but they followed her instructions without question, trusting in whatever magic she was performing. For 2 days, Yuna worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She roasted meat slowly over low fires, until it was tender enough to fall apart at a touch. She mashed tubers with fat and salt until they were creamy and smooth. She found a fruit that reminded her of apples and reduced its juice into a sweet glaze that made Taiho's eyes go wide when he tasted it. She taught Yunji how to season food, how to balance salt and sweet and sour. The old female took to it like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to show her the secret. Word spread through the settlement. Korath came to the storage cave just to smell what Yuna was cooking. Cubs gathered at the entrance, whimpering with anticipation. Even the warriors who had escorted her from the forest found excuses to walk past and breathe in the aromas. On the third night, Everything was ready. The great cavern at the heart of the settlement was the largest space Yuna had ever seen underground. Torches lined the walls, casting dancing shadows on the stone. Long tables made from tree trunks filled the floor, with cushions and furs arranged around them for seating. 600 Korath gathered that night. Every member of the clan, from the oldest elder to the youngest cub. They sat at the tables in family groups, watching as Yuna's dishes were carried out by volunteers she had trained. The meat came first. Tender, juicy, seasoned with herbs that brought out its natural flavor. Then the mashed tubers, rich and creamy. Then vegetables roasted until they were caramelized and sweet. Then the fruit glaze drizzled over everything like liquid gold. The Korath stared at their plates. They had never seen food arranged like this. They had never smelled anything so wonderful. Yuna stood at the front of the cavern, her heart pounding. What if they hated it? What if she had misunderstood everything? The scarred female was the first to eat. She took a piece of meat, placed it in her mouth, and chewed slowly. Her eyes closed. Her ears flattened against her head. For a moment, Yuna thought something was wrong. Then the scarred female made a sound. A deep, low humming that seemed to come from her chest. Other Korath began to eat. One by one, they made the same sound. The humming grew louder as more voices joined in, until the entire cavern was vibrating with it. Yuna felt tears on her cheeks. She did not know why she was crying. She only knew that this sound, this beautiful humming, was the Korath expression of joy. She had done it. The 3 cubs who had started everything sat at Yuna's feet, eating their portions with expressions of pure happiness. The smallest one looked up at her and made a sound that needed no translation. Thank you. Thank you for this gift. Yuna knelt down and hugged the little creature. She did not care about protocols anymore. She did not care about anything except this moment, this feeling, this room full of happy people enjoying a meal together. Her grandmother had been right. As always, food really did fix everything. The morning after the feast, Yuna woke to find the entire settlement transformed. She had been given a small cave of her own, warm and comfortable, with furs piled high for sleeping. When she emerged into the early light, she expected to find the Korath going about their normal business. Instead, she found them cooking. Everywhere she looked, Korath were gathered around fires. They were experimenting with the techniques she had shown them. Some were trying to roast meat the way she had taught. Others were mashing tubers, though their results looked more like lumpy soup than creamy paste. A group of cubs had gathered around Yunji, watching with wide eyes as the old female demonstrated how to cut vegetables into even pieces. Taiho spotted Yuna and came running over, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a cooking fire where several young Korath were arguing over the best way to season a piece of meat. They wanted her opinion. They wanted to learn more. For the next few days, Yuna became something like a teacher. She moved from group to group, correcting mistakes and offering encouragement. She showed them how to taste food while cooking to check the seasoning. She explained that different meats needed different cooking times. She taught the cubs how to make simple dishes they could prepare themselves. The change in the settlement was remarkable. Korath, who had eaten alone, now gathered in groups to share meals. Families who had barely spoken during food times now talked and laughed together. Cubs who had refused to eat now begged for second helpings. Food had become something social, something joyful, something that brought the clan together. On the 5th day after the feast, the scarred female came to Yuna's cave with a message. The matriarch wanted to see her. Yuna had not met the clan's leader yet. She knew only that the matriarch was very old and very respected, and that her word was law among the Korath. The matriarch's cave was at the highest point of the settlement, reached by a winding path carved into the cliff face. Guards stood at the entrance, but they stepped aside when Yuna approached. bowing their heads in what she now recognized as a gesture of respect. The cave inside was larger than she expected, lit by dozens of small oil lamps that cast a warm golden glow. Tapestries hung on the walls, woven with images of hunts and battles in Korath history. The matriarch sat at the far end of the cave on a pile of furs. She was ancient. Her fur had gone completely white, and her muzzle was wrinkled with age. Her eyes were still sharp, though, bright gold that seemed to look right through Yuna and see everything inside her. Yuna had started calling her grandmother Suk in her mind, after her own grandmother, who had taught her to cook. Teho was already there, ready to help translate. He had been working hard to learn human words, and Yuna had been learning Korath sounds. Between the two of them, they could communicate much better now. Grandmother Suk spoke, and Teho translated slowly. She says, "The clan is different now. Better. Happier." Yuna nodded. "I'm glad." The matriarch continued, and Teho listened carefully before translating. She says, "Our people were dying. Not in body, but in spirit. We had food but no joy. We had strength but no reason to use it. Cubs did not want to eat. Adults did not want to live." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. She had not realized things had been so serious. "You gave us more than food," Teho translated. "You gave us a new way to see the world. Meals are now times of happiness. Cooking is now an act of love. Families are now connected in ways they were not before." The matriarch rose from her furs and walked toward Yuna. Despite her age, she moved with grace and dignity. She stopped directly in front of the human and looked into her eyes. Then she held out her hand. In her palm was a crystal. It was small, about the size of Yuna's thumb, and it glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Yuna recognized it immediately. It was a communication crystal, a piece of technology far beyond what the Korath should have possessed. With this, she could send a signal to any ship within 3 systems. She could call for rescue. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Teho translated the matriarch's answer. "A ship crashed here many cycles ago, before I was born. We found this in the wreckage. We have kept it for 40 cycles, saved for a time of great emergency. We have never used it." "I can't take this," Yuna said immediately. "This is too valuable. Your people might need it someday." The matriarch smiled, showing teeth that were worn but still sharp. She closed Yuna's fingers around the crystal and spoke firmly. Teho translated with tears in his eyes. "You gave our cubs one small bite. They brought us a feast. Now we give you one small crystal. May it bring you home. This is the Korath way. Kindness multiplied." Yuna tried to protest again, but the matriarch raised a hand for silence. She says, "You have given us a gift beyond measure. The crystal is small payment, but it is all we have. Please accept it. Please go home to your people. Please tell them about the Korath." Yuna looked at the glowing crystal in her hand. Then she looked at the ancient Korath leader, a Teho with tears running down his furry face, at the settlement below where she could hear laughter and the sounds of cooking. She had come here by accident. She had shared one small meal with 3 hungry cubs. And somehow, that single act had grown into something that saved an entire people from spiritual death. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Give with an open hand, and the universe will fill it." Yuna bowed to the matriarch in the Korath style, pressing her forehead to her hands. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for everything. I will tell my people about the Korath. I promise." The matriarch reached out and touched Yuna's cheek with surprising gentleness. Teho translated her final words. "We will remember you forever. The human who taught us to eat. The woman who gave us back our joy. When you leave, You take a piece of our hearts with you, and you leave a piece of yours with us. That night, Yuna activated the crystal. 2 weeks later, a ship would come to take her home, but in those 2 weeks, she would teach the Korath everything she knew about cooking, and they would teach her everything they knew about being a family. It was a fair trade. The rescue ship found Yuna Park on the 17th day after she activated the crystal. She was standing at the edge of the Korath settlement, surrounded by 600 Vulf people who had come to say goodbye. Cubs clung to her legs. Adults pressed their foreheads to hers in the Korath gesture of deep affection. Yunji had given her a necklace made of carved wooden beads, each one shaped like a different food. Taiho could not stop crying. The ship's captain, a stern woman named Lieutenant Hemin Kang, stared at the scene with her mouth hanging open. What exactly happened here? She asked when Yuna finally boarded the ship. Yuna smiled. I made them dinner. 3 weeks later, Yuna stood in the office of Admiral Dong Wuhan at Federation Command. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen 3 wars and countless diplomatic incidents. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. Let me understand this correctly, he said, leaning back in his chair. The Korath have rejected all contact with the galactic community for 200 years. They have killed every diplomat we sent. They destroyed the trade ships that tried to land on their worlds. They are considered one of the most hostile species in the sector. That's correct, sir, Yuna said. And you're telling me that they have now sent us a formal request for alliance. They want to join the Federation. They want cultural exchange programs and trade agreements and diplomatic relations. Yes, sir, because you made them stew. Yuna considered this. Technically, it was a roast with a tuber mash and a fruit glaze reduction. Admiral Han stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something Yuna had never seen a superior officer do. He laughed. He laughed until tears streamed down his face, and he had to hold on to his desk for support. 200 years, he wheezed. 200 years of failed diplomacy, and a stranded pilot solves everything with a cooking pot. The alliance negotiations took 6 months. Yuna was present for all of them, serving as the only human who had earned the Korath's trust. Grandmother Suk herself traveled to Federation headquarters. The first time a Korath, matriarch had left their homeworld in living memory. The old leader had one condition for the alliance. One demand that she refused to compromise on. She wanted cooking schools. The Korath wanted to learn everything humans knew about food preparation. They wanted recipe databases and culinary training programs. They wanted to send their young people to human worlds to study under master chefs. And they wanted human cooks to come to Korath worlds and teach their techniques. Food brought us back to life, Grandmother Suk said through her translator at the final signing ceremony. We want to share that gift with every Korath on every world. This is not negotiable. The Federation agreed immediately. It was the strangest alliance condition in diplomatic history, but it was also the easiest to fulfill. 3 years passed. Yuna had returned to active duty, but she visited the Korath homeworld whenever she could. She watched as cooking became central to Korath culture. Families now gathered around meal preparation, the way they had once gathered around hunts. Cubs learned to cook before they learned to fight. The making and sharing of food had become a sacred act, a way of expressing love and building community. The change spread to other Korath settlements on other worlds. Everywhere the cooking knowledge traveled, the same transformation happened. Clans that had been dying found new reasons to live. Communities that had been falling apart came back together around shared meals. On the 3rd anniversary of Yuna's rescue, the first Korath restaurant opened on Earth. It was located in Seoul, just a few blocks from where Yuna had grown up. The building was designed to look like a Korath cave, with stone walls and warm lighting and tables arranged in family groups. Taeho ran the kitchen. He had spent 2 years studying at the finest culinary schools on 3 different planets, and he had become something of a celebrity. His face was on cooking shows. His recipes were downloaded millions of times. Humans lined up for hours to taste his creations. Yoonji had come with him, too old now to cook, but happy to sit in the dining room and watch people enjoy their meals. She wore her traditional Korath clothing and told stories about the old days to anyone who would listen. The restaurant was called The One Bite. Its motto, printed on every menu in 17 different languages, was the phrase that Grandmother Suk had spoken at the alliance signing: "Give with an open hand, and the universe will fill it." On opening night, Yuna walked through the front door to find the place packed with humans and Korath eating together, talking together, laughing together. The smell of cooking filled the air, a blend of human and Korath traditions that was somehow better than either one alone. Taiho rushed out from the kitchen to embrace her. His Korath had improved enormously, and his tail still wagged when he was happy. "Look," he said, gesturing at the crowded room. "Look what you started." Yuna looked. She saw human children sharing food with Korath cubs. She saw elderly Korath teaching young humans how to properly season meat. She saw 2 species that had been strangers 3 years ago now sitting together like family. "I didn't start this," she said softly. 3 hungry cubs started this. "I just gave them a bite of stew." Taiho led her to a special table in the back of the restaurant. Mounted on the wall above it, in a glass case, was a small, battered metal container. It was dented and scratched, clearly old and well-used. It was the bowl Yuna had used to feed the cubs on that first day in the forest. A small plaque beneath it read, "In both human and Korath," where it all began. Yuna sat down at the table and looked at that old bowl. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that food was love. She thought about 3 hungry cubs who had been brave enough to approach a strange creature. She thought about a clan of wolf people who had been dying without knowing why, and who had found salvation in the simple act of sharing a meal, 1 bite. That was all it had taken to change everything. Teho brought her a plate of food, a new dish he had created just for this night. It combined human cooking techniques with Korath ingredients, a perfect blend of 2 worlds. Yuna took a bite and closed her eyes. It was delicious. And somewhere out there in the galaxy, on a dozen different worlds, humans and Korath were sitting down to eat together. They were sharing food and sharing stories and building something that would last for generations, all because one lost pilot had decided to feed 3 hungry children. Give with an open hand. The universe had filled it beyond anything Yuna could have imagined.